Hello, and welcome to the Be Smart About Art show. My name is Susan J. Mumford. Let me just get that audio input kind of in a better position. So, everyone, it's great to have you here as ever on our show. This is the Wednesday edition. And what that means is that I am here to tell you a story. Now, sometimes it's myself as the founder of Be Smart About Art and a serial entrepreneur in the art market myself telling you my own stories. And sometimes it is somebody else that we bring on to tell a story as well. And that's just a little hint to let you know what we are working towards for the future as well. So today I'm here to tell you one of my own stories. This takes us back to when I was in my foundational days and weeks and months. And it's lovely to see people. So hello, in my own capacity as an art dealer. So this dates back, I think that this was, I'm trying to remember, this would have been 2006 this story took place. And then that's going to lead on to talking about the role of mentoring. I'll tell you a bit about what I did when I was seeking mentors and basically some guidance that I really think that would be insightful for people, even if you have even if you've been a mentor yourself or you've received mentoring. It's something that we can always improve upon. And I know from my own experience that you just get better and better as time goes as well. So let me read this to you. The piece in the book, Art is Your Life, Make It Your Living, is titled From Startup to Veteran, Be Open to Both Learning and Teaching. Many years ago, as a startup art dealer, I made a big faux pas and upset a veteran gallerist at his own private view in the prestigious St. James's. I wonder if he still remembers it. I still know the dealer today. That was in his St. James's London showroom. And he's still in St. James's, actually. Newbie me was excited about the event since I'd consigned a bronze sculpture for the show. I mean, this was a big deal. I had only earlier that year opened my own space in Soho in London. So what could possibly go wrong? Consigned a bronze piece? This seems excellent, doesn't it? The consignment note, complete with sales term, I've always been good at that kind of paperwork for gallery businesses, had been signed by both parties. The piece was ideally situated on the plinth, I still remember it to this day, with lights perfectly positioned and vernissage drinks were flowing. And by the by, let's just throw that in. So we've got vernissage and then we've got finissage. And for those of you who've not heard of finissage, it's the finishing event for an exhibition. And why not still do these events online as well? So then here is my confession of that rookie mistake. At the event, I gave my own catalog presenting works by the artist whose piece had been consigned to a major collector who was a client, not only any client, a very long-standing, dedicated collector of the other dealer. Whoops. Although the blunder was obvious with hindsight, I didn't know any better at the time. I was well-intending and would, of course, have honored the gallerist-client relationship for any resulting sales. The purpose of my seemingly blatant self-promotion was that as the artist's main representative, I had special insight into not only the maker, but also the work on display. So I thought, well, here's this collector who's interested. Let me give him my card, the catalog that's in association with this artist. And if I could help, that would be great. The other dealer saw that as me trying to steal his client. It's not actually what was going on. I simply didn't know any better at the time. Unfortunately, as far as the experienced dealer and loyal collector were concerned, the new kid on the block was trying to pull a fast one, and they were both indeed very unimpressed with me. My actions were ostensibly thoughtless, and I laterally apologized once I realized that I'd made a mistake. I made it clear that the intention was never to sell pieces behind his back. And I mean, I still remember there are various sayings about this, about what you remember. I know there's a Maya Angelou quote about this. It's how you make somebody feel. And I still remember the feeling of just absolute, utter, deep inside horror that I had when I realized my faux pas. So I really did feel bad. And I think actually maybe I think something that I'm already reading into this is quite useful, is that I didn't just go, oh, whoops. I went, oh, whoops. And I went to the dealer and I apologized. I said, I'm so sorry. I really didn't have any ill harm. And I still know the person today. This is a small industry. And so it is good if you do make mistakes just to see it as a learning opportunity. And if it means that you need to communicate with someone, even if that's difficult, please do. It's very smart of you to do it. And it's the harder thing to do, but it's the smarter thing to do. The experienced dealer took his understanding of how the art world works for granted. From his point of view, acceptable behavior was completely obvious. A collaborating dealer doesn't readily distribute his or her own marketing materials at someone else's event. And who was it? I was speaking with somebody in the last several weeks about the pandemic, and I remember the person going, "Oh, there are artists who are being desperate and they're trying to get into galleries." And I was going, well, we do need to think about what different points of career people are at and to honor that as well. So you might be talking with somebody who is earlier in their career or they're later in their career, and I'm sure that both ways can have benefit to one another. But do appreciate though that people have differing needs, and it's not to say that you couldn't end up knowing that person down the future, down the road into the future is what I really mean to say. So if someone is keen to work with people early in their career, they're associating their brand with a youngster, and arguably it's their professional responsibility to ensure that the startup understands accepted standards. I love that. I love that I wrote that. By providing mentoring, the knowledgeable dealer is helping to increase the likelihood of the new dealer's success, thereby paving the way for a long-term relationship as associates, which is win-win, right? I've come across knowledgeable dealers who appreciate that everyone is a beginner at some point and accordingly hold the hand of their junior associates. It's a smart move for winning the loyalty of someone with great future potential who can in time become a valuable ally. If you're new at your career or whatever project that you're pursuing, if something new to you, if you're embarking upon something new in this different era that we find ourselves in, and you're embarking upon collaborations with others who have more experience, don't pretend that you know everything. Instead, let them know that you'd like to learn from their experience. This kind of honest flattery can go a long way. And if you're working with someone else with less experience than yourself, ensure that they're open to learning and taking feedback from you, and really being able to do that is key. And hey, you never know, in this ever-changing digital age, newbies might very well have a thing or two to teach the veterans. Associate relationships are two-way and communication is paramount. And some people watching this will have heard me talk previously about a term that I adore, which is reverse mentoring. And reverse mentoring essentially is the concept that you might think that, okay, there's somebody who's really experienced who can mentor somebody who is earlier in their career. And that absolutely makes sense. Well, in today's world, I would argue that there's a big role to reverse that relationship too. So remember this when you're talking with people and when you're in conversations with colleagues or people who are new to their careers. What can they offer you? What might they be able to tell you? Perhaps different generational insight. It could be that they have got some different experience from other industries. I mean, even if you were to take, say, myself, even when I was still in my 20s and I had had some really serious retail management experience, I knew absolutely how to recruit people. I knew how to manage people. I mean, when I was 25 years old, that's what I did day in and day out. So even though at the time I was actually making my way into the art market as well. So if I had spoken with somebody who might have seemingly been an experienced, say, gallery owner or gallery manager, I do actually think I probably could have given them some insight in terms of some more proper formal processes that they might consider putting in place. I lacked the years, I lacked the wisdom, but I did have some experience. So sometimes you can take your own life experience and think, well, how can you apply that to even what you're doing today? And in this world that we find ourselves in, I mean, this is really requiring people to think outside of the box. And it's fascinating to see the different ways that people are responding. But if we come to the crux of what we're addressing today, which is thinking about that mentoring relationship and some tips on mentoring, bearing in mind always throughout this conversation that it does go both ways, I'm going to grab my little whiteboard here. I'm going to make some notes for you. Now, it's funny because actually a friend of mine just messaged me this morning on WhatsApp and said, "Hey, Susan, what are your tips on mentoring?" So I feel like I'm doing this session for him, but actually we've had this programmed for a good 10 days or so. So I've been mentoring people in the art world since, what year was that? That was 2011 when I started, so not quite a decade ago. And I'm one of these kind of natural mentors. When I was actually in my retail career, I was advising people who were younger than myself. And so I think if you're considering doing reverse mentoring, if you're thinking about making the most of how on earth you go about that relationship, that consultative relationship, I'm going to give you some tips. And I know that people are coming at this from different perspectives, so I'm just bearing that in mind. So the first tip that I have got for people, like anything in life, is to go for it. Now, let's see if I get that at the right height today. I'm trying. So when I say go for it, what I mean by that is if you are thinking about getting some support for your career, or if you're thinking about, say, giving support to others, my tip is to go for it. And the reason for that is that I know from my own years in business that when I was an early stage mentor, and I found it very natural, I thought, wow, this is amazing. It's like I was extracting all of this information out of my head. At the same time, I was going, gosh, do I need some qualifications for this? Should I really be doing this? I don't know. And the answer was yes, absolutely. It was fine to be doing that. So you can completely go for it. It's not a problem. You just and what you can do is be realistic and you know, if you're earlier in your, say you are giving mentoring, you might be charging less, and that's completely fine to be doing that. But the first thing, and I think that that applies to so much, is to just go for it. Now, second point that I've got, and this is, and really do apply to this to other things, because I do think that this is broadly applicable. The second point then is to set expectations. So there we go, set expectations. And when I say set expectations, this was actually a painful early lesson in my own mentoring experience that I relearned in more recent times as it happens. So when I started out in 2011 giving these mentoring sessions, what would happen is I would sit down with a person in my then members club in London, One Alfred Place. This was before I started doing remote or distance learning for people. So at One Alfred Place, I would sit down with the art dealer, the gallerist, the art advisor, or the artist. It's funny, in the earlier days, I had quite a few art dealers and similar roles who came along to me. And what I did is I would be there with the person. I started out by taking handwritten notes. And laterally, I've started taking notes on a device. So on an iPad with my Game Changer keyboard, or perhaps the laptop, just taking my own notes. But what I did in the earlier days, I would say, was a massive learning curve. So there I was, I'm listening. I would say that I do mentoring with a blend of coaching. And so I would be talking with a person, listening to the person, giving some specific career sort of steer. I'd at that time be helping people set up their social media pages. I've got a big smile coming up on my face because I still remember helping somebody who is now a pretty well-known artist set up his Facebook page. I mean, that's awesome. To see how well he's doing today is amazing. But what I would do after the session was probably too much. I would say, yep, great, I'll compile some note afterwards and I will send them to you. I would probably spend on average an hour and a half compiling the notes from the session. And that's an interesting one, because actually, whose responsibility is it to take notes? And are you attaining the value that you need when you're offering a service? So actually, that was probably offering something that was above and beyond what was necessary. So when I set expectations, it's right from, okay, what platform are we going to be using? How long are we going to be meeting? Is it paid for? Is it not paid for? I was doing paying sessions. I still do. I'd stopped at the beginning of 2020 and now I'm reintroducing some mentoring, but in a very specific way. Deep dives, basically. who is taking notes? Is anyone taking notes? And so actually I learned quite quickly that that was too much for me to do. And what I'll tell you when I learned it is I sat down with one artist, I still remember this, and I would, at the time I would give an initial complimentary one-to-one session. So we sat down, we did the session, I sent these follow-up notes afterwards, and I never heard a thing from him. And when that happened, I thought, okay, that's a really useful lesson for myself, that that was too much to offer free of charge. It was half a day's worth of my time. And that's what I want to bring you to a really important concept. And this is going to be applicable no matter really if you're talking about mentoring or if you're talking about doing a special project for somebody. It's, here we go, typing down. When I say typing down, I mean writing a word. I've got value. And the reason that I've written down value is that it's not the time that you're thinking about. Like, let's say you're doing a specific project with somebody, with a client. It's not necessarily the time that you spend, but it's the value that you bring. It's the value that you deliver. It's your years of developing the expertise that you have today. That's what you're bringing and that's what you're charging for. And this, it's the same thing when it comes to this mentoring relationship or this consultative relationship. And actually this applies to, say, artists who might be giving some tutorial. It's a very similar situation. It might seem on the outset, you might go, okay, a session has quote unquote this value, but really the value is what you are bringing to it. And that's when often when we think about value in this kind of relationship, that's where I have a very deep understanding as well of the importance of there being clarity and how you're setting expectations and how there's value being associated with the session. So my friend who asked me about mentoring this morning by WhatsApp message has offered to do 5 basically sets or to support 5 different young photographers earlier in their careers, probably commercial photographers. And he's somebody who is a successful commercial photographer, just simply wants to help people, particularly during this time that is so tough for people. And he's got some spare time at the moment. And so he's doing that on a complimentary basis, and that's completely fine. I think the question is, how are those people going to value it, and how can he be certain that that's being set up right? And I want to come to one of my other stories here in a moment that's related to that. In his case, what he did is he invited people to apply. So actually, that's really smart. It's not as if it's an award and then people have been gifted this who aren't even interested. There are people who've said, oh my gosh, yes, could I please get some support from you? So that's a situation in which you're setting it up so that you're making certain that the person that's being supported is actually going to value it. And it's important that you continue to value that as well. So how do you go about even finding a mentor if you're looking for someone? I mean, you can find some mentoring associations. When we talk about the arts, it's a very specific field. I mean, I always recommend to people that you have a variety of people who you can call upon. There's a friend of mine named Howard, who I've not called upon for some time, but he has been in business for something like 55 years now. So he started out his career, in fact, it's going to be almost 60 years now. So he started out his career as a 20-year-old, and he was a real estate agent and is now a consultant to that firm that he started decades and decades ago. And I remember about 5 or so years ago having this situation with one of my businesses and just suddenly feeling like a babe in the woods, going, I have no idea what to do. Pick up the phone to Howard. I used to also go to Donald, who is the one who would broker sales for these big airplanes around the world. I mean, just fascinating, the different people who you can get around you. And so I called Howard and I said, Howard, help. What do I do? And his answer was immediate. He said, oh, you need to put that into your articles of association. It's a very similar term in the States. It's got the word articles in it as well, but I don't remember the exact term. But basically, I had a situation in which I needed to change the governance of a business, called up the mentor who was just happy to help, and he just immediately helped. So thinking about who you can have around you and not only being in the industry that you're in. So presumably everyone who is watching this is in the creative industries. Have people from other fields, people with other insights. I mean, in myself, I now have got experience running for-profits and a not-for-profit, and those babies are different beasts. The not-for-profit has got a board. I've got to put important decisions past that board, and then particularly things that impact upon the financial state of that business. And then with the for-profits, I can just turn on a dime. And when you're running a small little business that's just your own business, in a situation like a pandemic, it's brilliant because it means that you can go, right, this thing looks like it could work, and you can just go and do it. And you surround yourself with people from different industries with different takes, always setting expectations when you're having mentoring relationships. So in fact, when I very first set up my gallery, I at that time reached out. I remember I took some nice writing paper, nice pen, handwritten letters, and posted them. I was really good about posting things back then, and I'm really keen to address that topic in one of our Be Smart About Art members gatherings coming up soon as well. How we can use the post, email, during this time to give some personal connection, that tactile sense. And so I sent 5 letters out to people who I thought could be good mentors for myself. Now, as an American, this concept of mentoring was very familiar to me, but in the art world at that point in time, it was not really a known concept. Do you speak about mentoring today and people know absolutely what you're talking about? Back then, I heard from one of them, and I do remember that our kind of vague arrangement is that I would go from the West End to her gallery in Chelsea and London. I would pay for the coffee, we would sit down, and we met a couple of times. And it's worth asking as well for people. And different people work in different ways, and it often really depends too on the person's time capacity. And do they do mentoring as something that is voluntary, or do they do something that is a paid for service? And I would say that those two different situations have got pros and cons as well. In the sense of when you are not paying for something, how is it being valued? That's really essential that you retain that people are valuing something. Otherwise, they start to take it for granted, and it can actually go a bit south, basically, if you lose that sense of this being something that has value to it. Now, in terms of some last tips on what you can do, and if you're working with somebody on a one-to-one basis, it can even be two colleagues who are working together as well. By the by, I would also think about a time frame or review. There can be situations in which this may not be quite as applicable, but there we go, time frame and review. So I've long found it really helpful to go, right, we're going to do approximately, let's say, following an initial 1 hour deep dive or 2 hour deep dive, then doing a series of monthly kind of one-to-one calls or one-to-one conversations, and then putting that in a period of something like 6 months, which enables you at the end of that period to go, right, how is it going? Is it still working? Could we change anything? And that just always gives you an opportunity. There are sometimes some people who, in my experience, as somebody who's done a lot of paid for mentoring, that there will be somebody who essentially goes, Susan, we've been working together for years, let's just do monthly sessions. And they want to just do it on an ongoing basis until kind of something is decided otherwise. And I think the last thing to leave with you now, and this is thinking about time frame, but it's also thinking about the kind of big picture, is being flexible. Okay, and so what I mean by being flexible is it's actually being flexible in multiple ways. It's when I said monthly, it might be that somebody has some personal upheaval. It might be that they suddenly have got additional needs. And so you want to be flexible in the sense of be flexible with each other. This is a type of professional relationship of some sort where you're honoring each other, you're respecting each other, and you're really thinking, okay, do we need to make some changes? Would it make more sense if we suddenly met again next week? Would it make sense actually that we give it an extra 6 weeks? I still remember the time that I was speaking with an artist who I was supporting. It was the end of January, and the National Portrait Gallery in London had their deadline for the BP Portrait Award. And so I got into Skype with this individual, and she said, oh yeah, the thing I'm going to be doing later in the studio is finishing the painting so it can go into the BP Portrait Award submission. And I said, why are we in this call right now? I said, do you want to dive into the studio and focus on that? She went, Susan, that's probably a really good idea. And I said, that's completely fine. Go and do it. We'll touch base in a few days, dive into it, don't think about me right now. Do what you need to do, and then we'll put our next session in the calendar in the coming days. And so she did, and I have to say it was a turning point in her career. That was absolutely just fantastic. I did think that in terms of being flexible as well. The other thing as well is that just different people have got different styles. So if you're somebody receiving support, I do think that it's helpful if you tell a person that you're working with, kind of if you've got any special learning needs, if you learn particularly well in working in certain ways, if you like to have an accountability list that you agree each time, if you like to be open-minded. And there is definitely a point when you talk about mentoring versus coaching, and I can see that we've got Deborah, aka Debs Henry Pollard, in the show with us today. And hello, Debs, and hello to our members who are watching as well. So she's a coach and I'm a mentor, and I'm a mentor with a blend of coaching. So mentoring is more about providing steering. Coaching is at the most basic level, really about listening. And it can be about motivation. And so when it comes to how you work with people, I know that I, as a mentor, I can be flexible on how I work. Now, not all mentors can be as well. I one time had a pretty intense situation. I remember somebody who was a mentor to the entrepreneurial stars came to my gallery, and wow, it was a whirlwind. This guy, he came in and he basically said, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And he was telling me everything I needed to do for my business. And it was very black and white. And he left the gallery, and I just went, wow, that's not what I was expecting. So the two of us had quite different styles, quite different ways of being and working. I would say we were not a good match for each other. I think he probably wanted my money. He probably wanted me to carry on getting support from him, but he was not the right person for me. So if you find somebody who is able to be flexible, then establish essentially how you would like to work. Something I love is when people are open to just intuition, to being open to intuition. So I can go into a conversation with somebody and they might think that we're going to be addressing A, B, C, and D, but actually they've mentioned this little thing over here, and I'll go, you know what? I think we should be going over there right now. What do you think? So it's something that I just, if you are amenable to that, that I encourage you to be open to that. With people who are long-term experienced mentors, they're going to be able to hear that, and they'll be able to go, actually, in order to address these things, we need to tackle this other thing taking place here as well. And what that takes is being open to the insight and the take of others. And it's really helpful for we humans when we are in our little worlds. And the whole thing about working with other people is basically being able to go, what different perspective can they bring me? And it's not to say that you always do what they suggest. I mean, I've said to so many people over the years, probably thousands by now, that listen, you do what you want to do. That's up to you, and you take responsibility for your own actions. This is my take based on my own experience of my own career as an entrepreneur in the art market, and also running multiple businesses in the industry, and also having consulted with so many people in the industry. So seeing all of these different examples of what's worked, what's not worked, and so that's my take. But people can do whatever they want, and they should do whatever they want. That's the nice thing about being in this free society, right? So that's up to you, and you just know that you take that decision when you make it. Well, everyone, that is going to bring us to a close on today's session, which I think was quite fun. I feel like this is a nice chatty little piece talking about a really important relationship. And if I think of some actions for you today, it's to really think about what kind of support are you seeking, and what kind of support might you like to give other people. If I think about the pandemic period, one thing that I determined myself was to provide support to community groups, to networks, to help them get online. And only this morning I went ahead and offered that support to a network that I belong to, because I thought, gosh, they still don't seem to have done anything online. They're teaming up with a different organization to do some webinars, but they're not actually doing any community gathering. So how could I help? So think about both of those things. And that's bearing in mind the motto that we have adopted, that we've created for the whole of this pandemic period, likely going into a recession, which is keeping it simple and supportive. So being really focused, enabling easy decisions for your client or your prospective client base, being supportive of others, and then inviting support as well. As it says on the screen behind me, participate, connect, and grow. So here you are participating. The next piece is going to be connecting with others in the community, and then that is followed by growing. And that, by the way, really nicely ties in with mentoring as well, because with mentoring, you are participating by saying yes to that. You are connecting with that other person, and then you are growing as a result. And I think a nice final point when it comes to this session is to say, when I have seen the biggest impact, it's been from people taking continual support and that continual growth. So it's not diving in and doing a single session. It's actually doing something. It can be seemingly small, half an hour once a month. I know that when I used to meet with Coach Tamara Gallon once a week, we would have a 1 hour call once a week, and we grew our businesses together. And that was in the earlier days of Be Smart About Art, and it's when her children were very small indeed. So you can do things in a consistent way. And that's when we talk about kind of small and regular actions. Is that what it's called? It's something like that. But it's that thing of, let's say you're doing 10 minutes of meditation each morning. It might be small, but it's frequent. So it's just that little bit, and it's amazing how much you do indeed grow as a result. It's been an absolute pleasure to have people here today. I trust that that's been insightful for you. I will be telling my friend who's just about to start mentoring some young photographers to take a look at this as well. Be sure, if you're watching this live, to choose to get notifications for when we go live in the future. We do so every week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And now on Fridays, Be Smart About Arts members are gathering. So I look forward to seeing some members for our conversation this coming Friday at a slightly different time for those of you who are watching. So it's a bit earlier than normal. And furthermore, check out our community at patreon.com/Be Smart About Art. You can also see everything that we're doing at besmartaboutart.com if you want to go to a one-stop location. We will soon be launching a program of monthly workshops. We'll be doing 2 in June, and then monthly from that point onwards, free for members, small fee for non-members. And then we are also going to be launching an e-commerce shop. So keep an eye out for all of those things. Everyone, thank you very much. It's been fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon online. And here's to thriving in this ever-changing art world. Ciao for now.